The typical gym experience of 10, 15 years ago was come in, be, I'll use the word berated into buying a membership, and then ultimately be left to your own devices. The beauty of the fitness industry in that model was that January rolled around every year and the repeat offenders would show up again. But, they were sold a bag of goods that, they were going to look like the next superstar by June when they join in January. And then the problem happened. And the problem was that we would take a one size fits all approach to onboarding our members. And that just doesn't work.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. Brought to you by Fitness World. Your fitness, your way. Visit fitnessworld.ca. Welcome to another episode of the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and today we're delving into the world where technology meets fitness and innovation meets success. Our guest today is a true visionary. He's the co-founder of Alta Technology Group, a boutique management consulting firm that's been the secret sauce behind some of the biggest names in health, fitness, and wellness across North America. Before venturing into the world of boutique consulting, he founded Motionsoft Inc., a heavyweight in software and financial services for the health and wellness industry. And in 2020, the company was acquired by Daxko. With a remarkable 25 years in software sales and business development, he's no stranger to the hustle and grind of the tech world. And let's not forget, he's a mastermind behind 5 successful acquisitions, raising over $40 million in venture capital, and growing Motionsoft into a company well over 100 employees. Get ready to be inspired and educated as we welcome the one and only Noshirvani. In the episode, we'll learn top tips from his entrepreneurial journey, get a glimpse of what to expect at this year's Fitness Technology Summit, and learn valuable takeaways about the intersection between fitness and health. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. Plus, we're continuing our gym and wellness haven tours with inspiring founder stories. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW. Digging into your history a little bit here, Al, I've come to learn the fitness industry was not necessarily the intention when you were going through your education. So how on earth did you land in this space?
Yeah, it was sort of just a right place, right time kind of thing. I was working for an organization while getting my MBA. And once I completed my studies, I decided to move on. My plan was to sort of do, I'm in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, so government is all around us. And shutdowns aside, one of the things that is big opportunity here is placing people and doing consulting work for federal agencies. And that was my goal. Unfortunately, the only people that were calling me were my former customers from what was at the time called KI Software. And so with their support, quite frankly, I was able to start a little company. It started out as a consulting practice. I ultimately went to my former boss and asked him if he'd be interested in selling the company. We raised a small round of friends and family money, and that was the beginning of it. We were October 8th of 2004, sitting on upside down paint buckets in a new office with 4 of my former colleagues. And we started what became Motionsoft.
So in those humble beginnings, because you're alluding, I guess the furniture budget wasn't quite there yet. What were some of the key learnings in those early stages of entrepreneurship that you feel still hold true now?
Wow, there were so many. Obviously some of the things that were sort of instilled in me as a person who grew up in an entrepreneurial family obviously hold true. Work hard. The business is almost an extension of the family. That's how you treat it. But I think the most important thing that became evident to me, and something that I found that I'm probably most proud of, was the fact that, throughout the early days of Motionsoft, we seldom had, and in fact, I think in the first 5 years, we never had a single person leave the organization. And so, finding people that believed in the mission, who saw the vision, who loved this industry, was key. And I think it was, in fact, when I sold the company in 2020, there were people with whom I had worked for and with for 15 years, and that was probably the thing that I was most proud of.
That's definitely something to be proud of. But what you're pointing out, you're kind of attributing it to them really buying into this vision and having the passion that's shared behind it. But for yourself as a leader, would you say there were certain qualities that you exemplified that really helped them hold on to that vision and keep that passion?
Yeah, it's funny. We had once we raised our first round of institutional capital, and we raised several rounds of capital. We had a team meeting, and I'll never forget my former CTO, Shane Edmonds, who had come to join us from Crunch Fitness, and he's now with a company called Forte Fit, who's done very well. But we were talking about what our culture was, and I remember Shane saying, one of the things that's interesting about this company is that it's got a culture of nice. And I think that really resonated with me, because my sense is that if you're nice to people, just to simplify it, I mean, we think of all sorts of much more profound words, but if you're nice, I think generally you'll succeed. I mean, every once in a while you get taken advantage of, but generally it served me well.
That is actually the most refreshing perspective, especially in the current polarized climate of the world, to have something as simplified as that and equate that with success. That's an excellent takeaway. I dare say as well, not one I hear very often necessarily too, but I think there is so much value to that, because at the end of the day, everyone starts somewhere. You mentioned you came from an entrepreneurial family, so I'm just curious, what sector were they in and where were you learning the skill sets in that capacity?
Yeah, so my father was an entrepreneur. My mother became an entrepreneur much later in life. She started her own travel agency long after my brother and I had gone off to college. But my father was an entrepreneur all his life, as was my grandfather, who was also a philanthropist. But he was in a completely different sector. He owned a company that is sort of akin to what WeWork is today, but back in the 80s.
Obviously, we're speaking about the fact you had an entrepreneurial beginning, but I know when you were at Motionsoft, it sounds like you worked with a lot of brands that at their time were in their infancy. They're well known now, but they were in their infancy. Can you see, like, take Equinox, for example, because I think I heard something that when you worked with them, they only had a couple operations going. Is there a commonality around certain ones that you worked with over things or practices that they embraced that ultimately led to their success, especially from a technology perspective?
Yeah, I think from a technology perspective, for sure. So, well, first of all, let me say that I think that identifying your brand or creating a brand identity, like Equinox knows exactly who they want as a customer, who they are selling to. So I think that's key. And trying to be all things to everybody is a bit of a challenge. I think that from a technology perspective, one of the things that I think still resonates today is, organizations that are in our industry, I think, create differentiation, and Equinox again is a good example, as is Crunch, by the way. But they create differentiation by building sort of unique and differentiated member experiences. And so my sense, and there are some huge fails in our industry from companies who did try and build their own technology platforms and their own technology stacks. There's a couple of wins, but predominantly there have been failures. I think what Equinox has done remarkably well is that they've created and owned the member experience, and they leave a lot of the sort of arbitrary stuff around compliance and security to companies that do it every single day. And so I would say, even today, and as I consult to organizations now, one of the areas that always comes up is the member app, right? So there's a lot of software companies that are out in the space right now that are selling a member app. Well, the member app is as important today as your front desk has been for the last 50 years. And so my sense is, buy the basics off the shelf and use third-party organizations to create that differentiation. And I think it starts with a member app. Your branding, your fit, your feel, all of those types of things are things that I think organizations that are most successful bring in-house.
How much of an importance emphasis has there been from the pandemic where we saw that shift to virtual and then now coming on the other side of it? How have you seen that flux and change?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge change. I think that, the days of the virtual exercise and those have sort of come to an end as it relates to the impact they had in our business. Obviously, virtual exercise is not going anywhere and it's going to continue. But I think people are finding that balance between being at home and also in the club. There's only so many hours a day that in fact, for this podcast, I left home very specifically and came to my club, and I'm doing it from here because I want to have a different view every once in a while. But what I would say is that what the pandemic did that will have long legs is it created a simplicity in our business that didn't exist before. And it created something that I refer to as sort of self-service as the new full service. And the ability to be able to communicate and interact with your club in a way that's convenient for you. And that could be walking up to the front desk, but more and more, we're finding that it is communicating via a device, a handheld device or a website, what have you. I think that's going to continue forever. And I think it's a good thing. If you look at things like membership cancellations and just look at commentary that people leave on Google reviews.
It's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's great is that people basically came to the realization that if they didn't make it simple, members were going to let the world know. And so the reviews of 10 years ago were always about how difficult it is to cancel my membership. All these people care about is money. If you look today, it's a lot less of that. And so I think those types of things are going to continue to be leveraged in mobile devices. I also think that transactions, whether it's mobile payments, access control, which is 24-hour access, all of these types of things can be enabled on these devices. And oh, by the way, it costs a lot less to work with a device than it is to print membership cards. The member experience is much better. The branding, which we talked about a moment ago, remains. So yeah, I think that that's going to continue. And the pandemic definitely had something to do with that.
On another scale as well, I think from the social well-being standpoint, because so many of the apps allow you to even converse with other members sometimes, or even if it's just that little reward that pops up saying, hey, you've had a 50-day streak. There's a psychological impact to that when it comes to retention, I feel.
Sure. I work with a colleague and I was at dinner one night and she was doing this. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm trying to hit my stand goal. It's like people will do anything to get those rewards. That's a great point.
It's so true. I actually recall a friend when the Fitbit first came out and she was just going in her basement, swinging her arms aggressively. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm trying to get to my 10,000 steps. I'm like, pretty sure that's not the point, but I appreciate the hustle.
Totally.
But we really will go to those great lengths. So you kind of are alluding there to some of the opportunities, but what would you say from your standpoint, especially someone who has seen this space, like technology is one of the most rapidly evolving spaces where adaptation is so key. So 3 prime opportunities for health club operators right now from a tech front, what would they be in your eyes?
So for sure, the ability to extend their reach outside the 4 walls of the club. So that would be one, in an effort, by the way, to become sort of the trusted source of fitness and wellness in people's lives, because we don't have that now. So that's one. I think that in terms of functions and features, I'd say nutrition is a huge opportunity. Being able to look, the reality is that if we sort of sit back and reflect on our industry, and by the way, I think I'm a perfect example of a person who uses the gym a lot. I play tennis. I'm a generally active person, but I don't watch what I eat, and the results they speak for themselves. So I think nutrition is a huge opportunity because, again, we have the ability to influence people's decisions while they're not just inside of our four walls. I think the other area that really bears conversation is mental health. And it's a big part of the topic and the conversations that we're going to be having at our Fitness Technology Summit this year. Because I do think that applications like Talkspace, applications like Calm, really can be incorporated into the member experience. So those would be my three.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I both know as well, when you look at all the studies that are coming out, I know it was UK Active just had one recently where the shift has happened, where that's now the majority. That is the reason why people are working out. And it's coming at a time that I'm sure a lot of us have realized on the other side of the pandemic. Yes, life responsibilities have come back. Yes, quote unquote, normalcy to a degree has returned, but there's repercussions of the shared human experience that we all just went through. This is like a prime solution. It's something, to be honest, it's why I was so willing to flip industries myself, because I believe in that so personally and so passionately. You talked about the fact the Fitness Technology Summit is around the corner. So expand a little bit more, because I know every year you really do have a theme of focus. So talk to me about what the theme is this year.
Yeah, so the theme this year is the convergence of healthcare and health club. Obviously, in some countries, it has much bigger implications than in others, and the U.S. happens to be one. The international, well, IRSA has for the past several years been a huge advocate behind trying to get a bill passed in the U.S. I know you've covered this in the past, called the FIT Act, which in essence allows us to use health savings accounts, which are essentially extensions of health insurance, which thankfully in Canada you don't have to deal with, but here we do.
Although our system is a mess, I will say.
That's true. That's true. There's always something. But so that really was what precipitated the original sort of theme. Since that time, coming out of the pandemic, we've touched a little bit about mental health. I think that speaks for itself. We touched on that. I also think that, it was interesting. There was a study that was recently done on the U.S. military, and the numbers were astonishing. And I don't want to quote them because I'll probably misquote them, but there was a majority of people who were being assessed for military service were getting denied because they weren't. I think it was called military fitness testing.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't able to pass basic military testing. And so when you start to think about fitness and national security in the same light, you sort of say, well, what can we do to solve this problem? I also think that there's some other variables that are playing into this proliferation of semaglutide and how people are leveraging that for weight loss. What does that mean for our industry? Most studies suggest that, in fact, you should be utilizing those drugs with a fitness regimen.
Yes.
Because otherwise you end up just being a really tired, lump of flesh sitting on a couch.
It is the part everyone likes to leave out from the conversation as well, for the most part.
Well,
magic solution, right?
Absolutely. One of my good friends is going to be on a panel of physicians and nutritionists at the Tech Summit. He's a bariatric surgeon, and he's talking about the fact that, as an industry, bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, has grown from 2,000 physicians 25 years ago in the US to 20,000 physicians that are doing those types of surgeries in the US today. But they have never been able to crack more than a 2% need. And so that just tells you that we are getting bigger and bigger. Yes. And we've got to figure out some other solutions, because it's really is the next pandemic, in my view.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I mean, obviously, having a platform that focuses around fitness and wellness, I have to be really conscientious of how that's presented when it comes to, I mean, even when you look at fitness narratives from a gym perspective, I feel like advertising what it was even 5 years ago is very different currently, because there was a disconnect. It was all about get shredded, get abs. This is the epitome. Well, how unwelcoming to anybody that is starting their fitness journey and feels like this place is not for me because it does not represent something for me. But on the flip side, you're just kind of like, this is a problem. a substantial problem that is not just a problem for the health of people's moms, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. It's also a very expensive problem for governments. And so I think it's been quite intriguing the more that I've learned about the space to see where is the resistance and the disconnect there. It's kind of like, how are we not being seen in the light as part of this continuum? It's shifting, but I feel like there is quite the uphill battle that you all as an industry are facing.
Well, look, I think a great deal of that has to do with what I always refer to as the sins of our past. And you alluded to it a little bit, right? It's always been about how much weight you can lose. And I think we also take a very sort of macro view of how to solve this problem. The typical gym experience of 10, 15 years ago was come in, I'll use the word berated into buying a membership. And I've heard stories from some of the veterans of this industry about what membership sales was like, 20, 30 years ago. The beauty of the fitness industry in that model was that January rolled around every year and the repeat offenders would show up again. But, they were sold a bag of goods that, they were going to look like the next superstar by June when they join in January. And then the problem happened. And the problem was that we would take a one-size-fits-all approach to onboarding our members. And that just doesn't work, because if you are a person who has been lying dormant on a couch for the last 6 years and you don't have an idea there are pieces of equipment that are in gyms that are much more complicated than what you might find in a doctor's office. And
True.
the doctor's going to let you go start messing around with the equipment on their own. And so if that person walks into the gym, we all know that first day you show up, you can pretty much do everything. You can lift anything, you can run real fast, but gosh, the next morning, it doesn't feel so good. And there begins the end of the journey, because you cannot, and the person who sort of enlightened me to this, I don't know if you've spoken with him before, Chrissy, was Paul Bedford. He's the retention guru. He's out of the UK. And he said, you can't do that. Like, you can't expect this person to show up 8 times in their first month. You need to taper it, have them come in once a week in their first month, and then take once a week to, twice a week, and really help them on their journey, because otherwise they're going to fail. And so I think that's where some of the sort of opportunity lies for us, sort of being able to take a persona-based approach to providing an onboarding experience that is tailored to meet an individual's needs.
Well, I'm curious because you're not just the technology guru here, but I understand that love of the fitness industry ended up strong, and you've got some gyms yourself. So how have you integrated some of this knowledge base into your best practices, and what's been the result of that?
So we've done a couple of things, and you touched on the fact that people may feel overwhelmed when they go into a gym because they see a bunch of people running around with shredded bodies, and that you may not be one of those people, and so you want to take an approach that's a little bit different. So one of the things that I did just recently, was worked with an architect in our space, Rudy Fabiano, and he sort of came and said to me, the problem with your gyms is that you have not differentiated between what he called your hard and your soft spaces. And what he meant was, you could be and by the way, people come in all sorts of different shapes and colors and styles and genders and all that sort of stuff. And his opinion was, you should separate people so that they sort of can move in different areas of your gym in a way where they wouldn't feel overwhelmed. And so at our gyms, we redesigned everything. We moved all the equipment around. Our soft spaces, which are our ellipticals and our cardio and our mats and our HIIT spaces, our functional training spaces, they're all on the front of the gym. And as you move toward the back of the gym, that's where the platforms are, some of the heavier selectorized, the 100-pound dumbbells. And we've created sort of this environment that's a little bit more, a lot more welcoming for people who aren't used to the gym. And it has had a direct impact on our ability to attract a member demographic that was not coming into our clubs before.
It's
So
amazing to think even something just as simple as architecture or place and placement could have such an impact, but it does make sense. You're putting what's familiar. Most people know what all of that equipment in the front is. And so instantly from, the brain perspective, you're like, I can connect and identify, I can do this. And then it would be up to your team to really move them through the rest of the space.
exactly right. And some of the other things we're thinking about is, putting an actual trainer on the floor who can help people on our dime, because ultimately, look, we're in a business to make money, and we want to sell more personal training, but the process right now just kind of feels yucky to me. Like, come in,
In what way?
I just bought a membership and I'm spending 50, 60, 70, $100 a month. Oh, now I want to sell you personal training. So book a session for a PT assessment. And then next thing I know, they're trying to sell me a 10 pack of training. But I think that if you come into the gym and you buy your membership and you have that floor trainer whose job is to welcome the members, introduce them to each other, introduce them to other staff, and then over time build value by saying, oh, by the way, if you arch your back on that tricep pull down, you'll do it'll have a better impact, or whatever the case is. I think that builds value, and then the member will say, well, what else can I be doing? And that's where the opportunity comes to upsell them on personal training, because it is true that the more wallet share you have, the stickier the relationship is with the member, and that's ultimately what we want.
Because your gyms are HVLP model?
So
Or
we started out as HVLP, but I'd say that we have a $19 entry point, but our membership and sort of a $50 cap. So I think we're probably more the HVLP 2.0 as opposed to the $9 membership.
Yeah, fair enough. But I do find like having those personal touches in those spaces, even from a gym goer's perspective, can make such an intense difference, because that community element, I think, has become more important than ever. That's the reason why people went back.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
Totally.
I mean, and that's like coming from a personal thing, that just like yourself, the gym is my sacred space. It's gotten me through some serious shit in life. And I think for other people, it does the same thing. And it's the believers in it, like you and myself. And those are the ones that really are propelling that message that we're trying to get across to people right now, that this isn't just about feeling physically better. It can bleed into every facet of your life.
No question. We in one of our locations in Leonardtown, Maryland, is a great example of that. After our redesign, we spent a lot of money on our group exercise spaces, and this morning, in fact, I was meeting with one of our executives, and we were talking about the space, and I said, "Hey, let's look at what it looks like real quick," and we logged into the security camera system because I wanted to point out something to him, and one of the tiles on the screen was of our group exercise studio, and we were doing a Les Mills class, and there were 25 people in this class, and I had not logged into the system in a long time, and we've got a CEO who Andy Stromberg runs the business, so this was a great opportunity to sort of just peek around. It was so nice to see all those people in there, and we left the video on, and as it ended, to your community point, everyone sort of got together outside the studio, and I couldn't hear what they were saying because we're remote on a camera, but you could see that they were smiling and laughing and talking. And this was, at 10:45 on a Monday with a class filled with women, which I'm sure you've talked to a lot of folks in our industry, 10 months ago, they were nowhere to be found. So it's great to see women back into the club. Hopefully that translates into a better work-life balance for them. I'm sure it does, because I think they kept the place running for the last few years.
Yeah, we're also the ones fighting for those Olympic lifting platforms. Strength is on.
It's hard to take a selfie on elliptical, I tell you.
That is true. You get the blur effect instantly. So there you go. It's got to count for something. The ultimate boomerang, although boomerangs are out, but neither here nor there. That's like the ultimate way to age myself as a millennial. As we look, though, I mean, we've been talking about the Fitness Technology Summit, and I'd love to hear more about the speakers. But on the note of building that community and mental health, it's not the only event that's taking place. You've got the FlyIn taking place. I had the opportunity to witness that in action last May. It was an incredible experience to watch. Tell me about why you decided to kind of marry these two together, and why advocacy has been so important for you personally.
So, it's not necessarily even advocacy that's important to me. What's important to me is to see this industry succeed. And I think the path to success is in our support of the work that Liz Clark and her team are doing at URSA. Last year, which was my first year of running the Fitness Technology Summit sort of independently, because prior to that, it was the Motionsoft Technology Summit.
Yes.
We sold Motionsoft, and now it's the Fitness Technology Summit. But last year, I made the decision, because this industry had given so much to me, to donate all of the proceeds of the event to URSA, and we did that. We actually donated $125,000 to the NHFA. And I wanted to continue that in some way. And obviously, getting people to come to Washington as a group, as opposed to sort of one-off, creates some buzz. And so this year, we worked with the team over at URSA, with Jeff Soulsby and Liz, of course, and Mike Kaczynski, to create the FlyIn. So a group of executives are going to be coming one day early. We're going to be doing a dinner for them on the evening of the 22nd, and then the morning of the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, I think I have the date right. We'll all head down to Capitol Hill, assuming the government's not shut down. And that's a whole
adds a little bit of a wrench.
A little bit of a wrench, but hopefully I think they're going to get their act together. And go and knock on the doors of senators and congressmen and their staff and talk about the importance of the importance of fitness. We'll talk about military readiness. We'll talk about mental health. And I think it's time, it's those types of things. And we do have some pretty big support in the Senate as well as in the House. Kevin McEwen, the team over at the Atlanta Club, have implemented a project. I think it's called Project 435, which sort of assigns a congressman to different organizations around the country, 435 districts, which all need representation from our industry. So there's a lot happening, and I give Liz and her team a lot of credit for making URSA. We're still an industry association, but advocacy was never a strong point. And so it's great to see the work that she's done, and I want to be very supportive of it.
Well, and I think it's just one of those situations when it comes to lobbying on Capitol Hill and getting the message out there. How great is it? Because at the end of the day, obviously, dollars and cents matter. We know what happened during the pandemic. We saw what happened to businesses. There is that side where this message needs to be taken hold for the vitality of the industry to be seen as an essential part of a service that we need in the country. Those dollars and cents aside, it's also making a tremendous difference, quite literally, in people's lives. And I think it's very rare to have an industry that marries both so beautifully. When it comes to, obviously, you've been doing the Fitness Technology Summit for several years. And again, this is the biggest sector, I think, of adaptation that there is, because when you look at integration of AI, technologies are always changing. You need to be at the forefront. How can you be at the forefront? So what are some of the key speakers or opportunities that are going to be available when people come and show up for the summit this year?
Yeah. So look, the summit is all about establishing relationships and networking. And then we throw in a couple of nice panels. The things that come to mind, Mo Iqbal from Sweatworks is going to be working with a panel of folks on wearable technologies. Mike Levesque is on that panel. From my zone. Debbie Fiorella and Beth Smith from 24 Hour Fitness are going to be talking about the member journey, the customer journey. Debbie was, I think, with Universal Studios. She's the Chief Technology and Digital Officer. And Beth, prior to joining 24, was at Best Buy. So they've got a unique perspective. I think that bringing in people from the outside is important for us, because I think that gives us a new lens to look at our businesses through. I mentioned that we're going to have some physicians and nutritionists on our panel to talk about some of the topics that are top of mind as it relates to convergence of fitness and healthcare. The folks over at ABC and the folks over at Matrix are doing some really interesting panels. One of them is on attracting Gen Z and millennials back into the club. I think Gen Z, millennials we got a checkbox on that one, but Gen Z back into the club. And the folks over at Matrix are doing a panel on the sort of integrated equipment and creating a unified experience with your console technology. So we're really, and we're talking about architecture. I mentioned my experience, Rudy, and he's going to be there. Megan Lawler
Amazing.
is going to be there. Cher Harris from the Houstonian Club is on that panel, talking about how they just went through a massive renovation. So it's a very, very diverse group of people that are going to be speaking and addressing a lot of different topics.
Fully stacked, great place to network. You mentioned there the importance of bringing an outsider's perspective. Are there certain industries that you find offer up really beneficial learning parallels?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, totally. I think hospitality is one, and that's evidenced by the fact that oftentimes when some of the larger organizations in our space are looking for leadership, they'll bring it in from companies like Starbucks. I think hospitality and food and beverage are industries that have a lot of similarities. I recently had the former CIO of Equinox, Samir Desai, on a weekly sort of webinar that I do with a group of executives. And he was talking about how Abercrombie and Fitch, which is where he is now, is really leveraging technology in much different ways, and gave a lot of people some really great ideas on where to start. Because this year it's AI. Last year it was Web 3.0, and there's always something. I do think AI is a little bit different. There's huge opportunity, and I think very specifically huge opportunity in our industry. So those are some of the industries that I think have some parallels to fitness.
On that future of fitness notes and your sentiments there on AI, what part of it is exciting you most in that element when you're saying that there's opportunities there? Because at the end of the day, it's changing how we all operate, even outside of the industry.
Yeah. I think, there's some of them are, it's definitely a little bit scarier than others. But clearly whenever you can make recommendations to people with regard to what they should do in a way that saves money, that becomes interesting. So certainly around nutrition and exercise regimens and things like that. And I think a lot of people have spoken about that. I actually think that there's some other implications around more functional things that we do every single day, that quite honestly eliminate the need for some back office support that we currently carry on our books. But the whole member service component is something that I think we can leverage AI for immensely. Whether it's freezing your membership, canceling your membership, changing your address, updating your credit card, any of those types of things can be facilitated using technology, and AI is going to make it that much easier.
A lot is going to be made easier, but you kind of started out saying, yes, there are some scary things. So from your perspective, you're an expert in a lot of this space. What does scare you in that capacity?
I think that there's a lot being talked about as it relates to replacing personal trainers. And I'm not sure I fully embrace that. I do think it can be used as a building block to a successful personal training journey for members, but I don't think you're ever going to replace the hand holding and the expectation setting that a human has, because it's easy to just not listen to words on a screen. You can just tune them out. I mean, we all do that with notifications on our iPhones now. Healthcare changes all the time, and you need someone, as you know, these natural language learning models are somewhat dated. They're not today's news, right? And so if you were to go into ChatGPT right now and start asking about, I think the learning model is probably 2 years old.
Yeah, 2021.
You start asking about I don't know, maybe even what we talked about, semaglutide, right? And its impact on fitness. I'm not sure it would give you the right answer. And so I think you have to be careful about those types of things. A human being is continuously educated. And so I think those are some of the dangers.
I completely see that perspective. Obviously, the conversation's been out there. Would it replace a personal trainer? And I remember when the OpenAI first came to fruition last fall, I started playing with it, and I actually did a whole thing of, can it replace a personal trainer? And it sure can get specific. I put all the measurements, what the goals are. And then I was like, make me a nutrition routine around that. It did that. And then I was like, I don't know how to cook. Can you show me the best way to meal prep this? It did that. That being said, at the end of the day, all of that information has been available forever. Granted, you go backwards decades, it was in dusty books in a library, but it's all available. And you cannot discount the fact that us as human beings are very good at excuses. And it's a lot easier, as you said, to say, to the little notification that pops up, or to lie to it. Because how many people have logged something in a MyFitnessPal and cheated what the portion size or what have you? At the end of the day, we know you're only cheating yourself, but it's just this weird human nature thing. Whereas a personal trainer taking you through and really getting deep over why and what your motivators are and knowing how to tailor your experience through that, I don't think anything could ever take that away. You're going to have maybe the same 5% that we know are going to show up at the gym all the time, show up at the gym. That'll be the same 5% that could do it just with an AI and get them to their goals. But the other 95 that, again, we have a million reasons in our life and our busy lives and getting busier lives to come up with excuses. They need that external hand holding. Like, there is a gift that happens in our gym doors when people do embrace and realize that 10-pack of sessions could quite literally change so many facets of their lives, not just bringing them success in the gym, but success in business, success in their family, success with raising their children. That is what it's all about. So I cannot agree with you more. AI may be a little bit scary, but that's the one facet I'm like, it's not going away.
Yeah, well, coming full circle, that person who was lifting her hands up in the air, and I said to her, well, you're not really standing up. That's not going to help your stand goal. And her response was, well, my watch doesn't know that. And so to your point, people will take advantage of technology if they can.
Oh, it's so very true. I love that you're like firsthand experience. I have witnessed that. Well, we've talked a little bit about future of fitness, obviously the Fitness Technology Summit coming up. For you personally, as somebody that has had such this vast journey through so many different spaces of the industry, what's next for you?
So my partner and I, Tara Lovett, and I started a company called Alta Technology Group. And for the past year or so, I have been working with some of the biggest brands in the fitness industry and providing them management consulting and advisory services, whether it's selecting a software vendor and going through the proper selection process, the RFP process, negotiating a contract, or providing sort of fractional technology services. We're really focused. There's a huge need in this industry. I think we bring some good value and obviously a lot of expertise, whether it's around payments or software integrations, et cetera. That's where the majority of my time is focused on right now. In fact, Alta Technology Group is the company behind the Fitness Technology Summit.
Well, I will say congratulations to you, because I love stories of people that just keep persevering. And I especially love stories of people where you're like, I didn't even intend to go this way. It unfolded. I leaned in, and it really has served you very well. Obviously, the fact that you have become so connected in the industry and in a space that couldn't be more important at this time when it comes to where we're heading. You mentioned, speaking of full circle, that you came from a family that was highly entrepreneurial. So I imagine this final question may relate to something they shared with you, but when it comes to mentorship on your entrepreneurial journey, what has been the best piece of advice that you have received that you would like to impart on someone whose ears are on this right now?
I think the best piece of advice that I received came in a story that was shared with me by my dad about my grandfather. And it basically suggested that, when things are rough for people that you have been working with for a long time, embrace them and help them get through it. And I think that served me really well. And it comes in lots of different shapes and forms. If you've got a customer that can't quite make ends meet, but that with whom you've been working and who was part of your success, help them get through it. And that's been my mantra.
Of course it has, because nice has been part of your mantra as well. So that really just stays on brand for you, doesn't it? Well, Al, honestly, I have to say it's such a pleasure to connect with you. I'm sure it's probably the busiest of times with the summit approaching. So I appreciate you carving out the space.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. And thank you for what you do for this industry, because I think it's important to get the word out to as many people as we possibly can.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.